When you think of Vinland Saga, an anime all about Vikings, its depiction of war, revenge, and ridiculous action are probably what stand out. But I'm a weird philosophy bitch boy, so I fell in love with this series in episode 18, when quotes like, "Are you saying that death is the essence of love?" started flying, with a prince swearing off God because he was being a dick to humans. So I started looking more into what the characters had been and were saying from that point on, and I think I found three main philosophies that correlate to three main characters. Thor's idea of the warrior, Askeladd's of slave, and Canute's of love. Now, stick with me for a little bit and we'll try to put some context and explanation to these that will not only deepen the themes of the anime, but also say how they can relate to us today even though they're 11th century Viking action tales. That's a weird sentence I thought I'd never say. But also a heads up that we are going into spoiler territory because I do need to discuss a lot of major plot points. Also, if this sounds like your kind of jam, consider leaving a like or subscribing before continuing on here. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and really get into things here. All three themes follow a similar pattern. First, develop the idea within the plot, then state the idea, and finally cap it all off with a grand action. They lead through and into each other though, so we'll start at the beginning of the anime with Thors and his idea of a true warrior. The very first thing we're presented with in Vinland Saga is Thors absolutely kicking ass, like seriously going ham, full beast mode on the opposing army. But that is just a glimpse, revealing that he was the greatest fighter in the Danish army. Keyword there being was. At a certain point, he literally drops his sword, and along with it, his warlike lifestyle for something different. Now, as we're moving along, keep in mind the literal dropping of the sword there. Cut to Iceland, where he lives with his wife and two children, and he's just a dad, doing normal dad things, like shoveling snow, or putting his kid to bed, or being concerned about his son just absolutely loving the idea of war. Okay, maybe that one's not so normal. He's clearly no longer a man who wants combat, but that doesn't matter much when a former ally shows up and strong-arms you to go to war with the idea of killing your whole village. When the young men of the village learn about the potential war, they're all ecstatic to get the opportunity to fight and possibly go to Valhalla. But Thors plans to drop them off well away from the battlefield and ship them back to Iceland. But that doesn't quite happen. Askeladd intercepts them and underhandedly ends Thor's life, who refused to let his men fight or even kill a single of Askeladd's. Cue the important line for Thor's arc: a true warrior needs no sword. Now clearly this has surface level meaning directly related to the action, as he's refusing to harm Askeladd's men and laying down his life for his own men's lives and his child's as well. But at no point does he say he's not a warrior anymore, just that a true one needs no sword. Now I think we can look past these surface level meanings to something deeper, and I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to say that it could mean that life itself is a bit of a battle. Thors had a great life as a Dane. The king considered him their greatest warrior and would afford him any luxury he wanted as long as he just kept fighting for them. You know, the thing he's basically a god at. Despite all of this, he leaves to start a family in the remote plains of Iceland, where you have to shovel snow off your goddamn roof so you don't die in the middle of the night. Thors knew this would be a battle harder and more noble than any war he would have fought. As a true warrior, he doesn't kill. Ending a life takes strength, but only a matter of seconds, and instead he nurtures, a decades-long process devoted to his children. War is hell, and you can lose your life at any instant, but it's temporary. They finished a conquest and got to return to comfort, but a peaceful life was consistent and counterintuitively harsh. In some respects, and especially for a man like Thors, this normal life would be harder than being a traditional warrior. He gave up a simple, goal-oriented life to craft his own ideals, follow his own direction, and create something for the greater good, which no one else was even attempting to do. This is where we'll spring onto the next topic, which follows through from Thor's death to Askeladd taking over as a more main character. Now, Vinland Saga is an anime all about Vikings, but at the end of the day, Askeladd is basically a pirate. He fights for the highest bidder, the exact reason why he took Thor's life. And Even though he is likable at times, he's a massive POS. Not just a thief or a liar, but the kind of man who would slaughter an entire village for his own gain. What he does for money up until Canute's awakening, but we'll save that for later. So what's Askeladd's key theme? Well, it's slave, and its big line is everyone is a slave to something from episode 8. This is brought on by his uncle, who refuses anything that won't make him a buck, whipping one of his slaves. Askeladd says how his uncle is no different from the slave, making all his actions monetarily. Ironic coming from a man who does the same, but when we see his true motives later, this point will become a bit more moot. In secret, he hates everyone around him, viewing them all of the same breed, useless men who have no greater value. They all fight for money, God, or Valhalla, but nothing of their own choosing. None of these men, save Thors, crafted a path from themselves. Every goal or ideal or value they lived by was just something they learned to pick from a standard pool and follow from there. This relates back to Thor's warrior, where traditional warriors simply serve something worldly. Eventually, Askeladd breaks his own slave role for Canute when his men start to believe his luck ran out. The man loses everything, his money, men, and almost his life a few times. But he recognizes something deeper in Canute, which eventually awakens. To get there though, he has to leave behind everything of his life so far in the same vein as Thors did. And at the end of the day, lay down his own life as well. Both Thors and Askeladd's themes are represented very well in Thor's son, Thorfinn. He spends every waking moment trying to win a fair duel from Askeladd so he can chop the fucker's head off. Every fiber of his being is devoted to this personal war of his. He does this to try and get revenge for his father's death, and he shows the traditional warrior as a slave to worldly revenge and ends up near the bottom constantly. Following with everything we've covered though, as a more traditional warrior, he should be doing just fine. As a great warrior, he could have had anything he wanted from almost anyone. But in a demented way, Thorfinn is also breaking the mold, discarding every standard goal for his simple fixation. Just as the only two men he's ever followed, his unique focus drives him to terrible situations, which could be remedied if he simply gave up and accepted the normal. Any of them could have called off their quest at the start, sat back and been happy where they were, and all of them ended up worse off from them, even the simple warrior. It's a broken system which rewards fealty to the status quo and a lack of self-driven goals, even for a prince like Canute. Canute starts as a meekly man, focused on religion over combat. In almost every sense of the word, he's the definition of failure for his people, and his father sends him off to war hoping he'll die an honorable death, and he won't have to deal with his own son anymore. Men try to capture him and use him as collateral to bribe his father, while at the same time different men will slaughter entire villages in the name of his safety. No matter what side they're on, friend or foe, everyone around him dies in the name of God or his safety or even just pure thrill of combat. On the verge of capture once more, his priest companion begins one of the greatest philosophical diatribes ever crafted about love. All of these men fight and die and fight and die and fight and die, but for what? The only way they ever know peace or love is in death, when they can no longer war or desire, and give themselves willingly back to the land without complaint. This sparks Canute's flame as he begins to ask God, why? Now his entire personality and life is based on religion. He only speaks up to defend his God, and he prays rather than fighting. But traditional warriors and slaves to combat change him. This is a harsh world where even loving someone comes at the detriment of people around them. The only man who ever loved Canute allowed innocent men, women, and children to be executed for his safety. According to his beliefs, almost no one in this world would be worthy of salvation. However, he doesn't blame the people, but instead looks to the world around them. Is it their fault for how they are if it's the only preferable option? With that in mind, we're going to take a quick sidetrack to look at the one-liner that sums up his philosophy. Now, for Canute's section, this is actually harder even though it's a dedicated chunk of screen time, and it's also harder because this is going to be developed moving forward, and because he's posing more of a question that he wants to find the answer to, rather than directly stating something. So I think the best thing we could use to sum this up is a question he poses, which is, but then why is there no love in the hearts of men? And this also plays back into him looking past the people into the situation that created it, because even though his question is about love in the hearts of men, he looks past them and to the system. Let's look at the men who did something different to understand why he questions a higher power. Thors leaves war for a harsh land, gets hunted down, dragged back in, and killed. Askeladd begins to fight for something greater of his own choosing, which leads him to harsh treks through the mountain in hazardous weather, his men abandoning and attempting to kill him, and the loss of everything save his few loyal companions. Those who strive for something greater are punished, and Canute questions the system which inhibits love, rather than the people who have never seen it. He swears off a god whose world and rules are not fit to save humanity, vowing to create his own paradise on Earth, somewhere where true warriors are more common than warriors, and humans are no longer slaves at their core. Canute is the endpoint of both Thor's warrior and Askeladd's slave, with his own idea of love that he wants to make possible in a new world. So what does this mean for you? Yes, you right there. How different are we from these characters of Vinland Saga, even though it's an anime about Vikings? Now, we're not all out there constantly fighting wars, but I know a lot of people who describe life as more of a battle. Now, society and normals often push people to situations and work with little personal and also little monetary enrichment to them. And for a lot of these people, life becomes about living through the shit times for the glimpses of good. Now, you might say you could just choose to do something else, but you need money to survive. Now, let's be depressingly honest. It's the driving factor for everyone, for almost every action taken in the modern age. Nothing happens in society without money, well-intentioned or not. Even acts of kindness, of giving things away, of gifting items, requires money to get those items in the first place. Personally, I'm about to graduate college with a degree I have little care for, in a field I have little interest to work in. Now, this was my choice, but every factor of my life, from people to media to almost everything, was pointing me to this field. Because they want you to get a good job, which really means a job that makes money, which really means just having money. These factors had little or no concern for who I was or what I wanted. A lot of people are punished by life for trying something different, something enriching to themselves. Although the mediums have changed, I don't think we're that dissimilar to this 11th century Viking anime, no matter how stupid that sounds. So what does this mean for us? Well, we need more Canutes. Also, huge note right here, I'm talking about prologue, story arc, first season Canute. If he ends up being some wicked dictator or piece of shit and doing, stupid things, don't be like, oh, Professor Virel told me to be a dickhead. I'm talking about him righteous and loving at the end of season 1. We need more people to question what kind of system holds people's noses down to the grindstone and tells them to wait for a turn that never comes. More people who believe we can create something greater, where love is equal and humans can create and live for their own true ideals, instead of just chasing monetary gain whether they want to or not. I'm not saying that society is evil and we should all be hunter-gatherers or something absurd, but that we should always strive for positive change, rather than letting progress stagnate because things could be worse. Now, one person can't do much, but who knows what we could do together, for all of us, if we start having more Canutes. Well, that was disgustingly positive an ending for me, but if you liked what I did here, let me know by pressing that button people always tell you to smash at the end of videos like a dickhead. I guess I'm doing the same thing, but I'm at least trying to be funny about it. Also, a lot of times I feel pretty alone in how I think about some of these concepts, so let me know if you think similarly or differently down in the comments, as well as letting me know what you thought about the video or any ideas you have on the series as well. Consider subscribing for more great quality anime talks and reviews like the ones on screen right now. But anyway, in all seriousness, thank you for watching, and it'd be great to see you again soon. All right. Ugh, why does my chest fucking hurt? Probably from being so positive. Ugh.